One of the most outstanding characteristics of C.S. Lewis's nonfiction prose is his use of metaphor. Regardless of the work, examples of metaphor abound as Lewis uses word pictures to clarify his arguments and ideas. For instance, in The Abolition of Man, Lewis notes that the task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts. I remember the first time I read that, I was just struck by what a vivid metaphor he had created. In Surprised by Joy, about the numerous books available to him as a child, he writes, "I always had the same certainty of finding a book that was new to me as a man who walks into a field has of finding a new blade of grass." And in the preface to Mere Christianity, he includes a disclaimer that cautions the reader against regarding Mere Christianity, he says, quote, as an alternative to the creeds of the existing communions, as if a man would adopt it in preference to Congregationalism or Greek Orthodoxy or anything else. And then to make the point clearer, Lewis creates this helpful metaphor. It is more like a hall out of which doors open into several rooms. If I can bring anyone into that hall, I shall have done what I attempted. But it's in the room, not in the hall, that there are fires and chairs and meals. The hall is a place to wait in, a place from which to try the various doors, not a place to live in. So it's not surprising, I think, that Lewis is aware of how frequently metaphors appear in the Bible. One in particular is how the door is used metaphorically in the New Testament. References are made to striving to enter heaven by the narrow door. That's from Luke 13:24. Also to the door of faith, Acts 14:27. Also to a wide door for effective service having opened from 1 Corinthians 16:9. Also to a door being open for me, that is Paul, in the Lord. That's from 2 Corinthians 2:12. And finally to God, quote, opening up to us a door for the word, from Colossians 4. Jesus himself, as many of you know, is often associated with a door. For example, after Jesus relates to his disciples some of the signs of the end times, he says, when you see all these things, recognize that he, God, is near, right at the door. That's from Matthew 24:33. Better known, perhaps, is Christ's famous statement in Revelation 3:20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him and will dine with him and he with me." Indeed, it's in the passages where Jesus claims to be the door to communion with God that we see the fullest operation of this metaphor. In John 10, we find the best example of this. In verses 1 through 5, Jesus uses the parable of the shepherd whose sheep will only respond to his voice to indicate his own relationship, that is, Jesus' relationship with his disciples. He says, "Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." St. John notes that because the disciples did not understand this figure of speech, metaphor if you will, Jesus has to go on and make explicit his meaning. And Jesus goes on to say, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture." Later, Jesus uses the metaphor again by answering Thomas's question regarding how they would find Christ after his crucifixion. Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." So Lewis's knowledge of these scriptural passages is put to work throughout the Chronicles of Narnia. Doors are used significantly in the stories, and echoes of the biblical references made above resonate often. 4 specific points about Lewis's use of doors are noteworthy. First, the literal door leads to the door, with a capital D, Aslan. Second, Aslan is a two-way door. 3, passages through the different literal doors into Narnia is always unplanned. And 4, all who enter the doors are called into Narnia, but none are compelled to stay. Some who are called do not seem to belong. So let me unpack that a little bit more. And I'm going to rely on your knowledge of all the Chronicles of Narnia. First, in every instance, the physical doors that the children use to enter Narnia eventually lead to the door, to Aslan. The doors themselves take on different forms, from the wardrobe door in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, to the framed pitcher in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, to the railway station in Prince Caspian in The Last Battle, to the garden door at Experiment House in The Silver Chair, to the magic rings in The Wood Between the Worlds and The Magician's Nephew. Metaphorically, the doors function to take the children out of their real world and into a new other world. That is, the doors serve to move them from a mundane, everyday experience to a new world, a new reality, a new life. This is evident almost immediately in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the importance of the wardrobe doors are repeated a number of times. For instance, listen to some of the chapter titles. Chapter 1 is titled, Lucy Looks into a Wardrobe. Chapter 2, What Lucy Found There. Chapter 3 is Edmund and the Wardrobe, and chapter 5 is entitled, Back on This Side of the Door. More importantly, however, the doors inexorably lead to Aslan, who offers the children an additional new life experience. Edmund, for instance, confers with Aslan after betraying his brother and sisters and after being rescued by Aslan's forces. Of their conversation, we read, "There is no need to tell you, and no one ever heard what Aslan was saying, but it was a conversation which Edmund never forgot." From this point on, Edmund, though far from perfect, is a, quote, new creature, with Aslan confirming this by becoming the sacrificial door to Edmund's new life. Second, the children only become aware of Jesus Christ in their own world after meeting Aslan in Narnia. Aslan then serves as a two-way door, both to the new life in Narnia and in the real world of the children. For instance, at the end of Prince Caspian, Aslan is revealed as the door out of Narnia and back into the real world. By the way, the title of that chapter is Aslan Makes a Door in the Air. There, quote, he caused to be set up 2 stakes of wood, higher than a man's head and about 3 feet apart. A third and lighter piece of wood was bound across them at the top, uniting them so that the whole thing looked like a doorway from nowhere into nowhere. In order for the children and the older Telemarine men to return to the real world, they must pass through this door in the air. When Aslan offers the Telemarine soldiers the chance to return to the island and the world from whence their ancestors had come, all are initially skeptical. Finally, though, one of them takes the offer and approaches the empty doorway of the stakes. Aslan blesses him, and the soldier, quote, squared his shoulders and walked into the door. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. They saw the 3 pieces of wood, and through them the trees and the grass and the sky of Narnia. They saw the man between the doorposts. Then, in 1 second, he had suddenly vanished. When the other Telemarine soldiers saw this, they accused Aslan of murdering their comrade. So it's left to the children to go through the door. And Lewis, by the way, capitalizes the word door throughout this sequence. When the children do this, they find themselves back at the train station where their adventures had begun. Perhaps the best example of Aslan serving as a two-way door both to the new life in Narnia and in the real world of the children occurs in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. At the end of the book, Edmund and Lucy meet Aslan in the form of a lamb. To Lucy's question about how to enter Aslan's country, the lamb replies, "For you, the door into Aslan's country is from your own world." That the children fail to make the immediate connection between Aslan and Jesus Christ is clear when, after the lamb is transformed into Aslan, Edmund asks, Are you there too in the real world, sir? In Aslan's response, we see more of Lewis's use of the scriptural knowledge, since he employs one of the biblical names of God to begin, I am. But there I have another name. You must learn to know me by that name. This was the very reason why you were brought into Narnia, that by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there. So Aslan makes clear that the children's experiences in Narnia up to this point have just been preparation for the more important event of meeting him in their own world. In addition, Aslan promises to, quote, open the door in the sky and send you to your own land. So we see that here Aslan functions, as in Scripture, as both the agent, the one who opens the door of new life, and the object. He is the door of new life. He is the two-way door to new life. An episode from The Horse and His Boy, in that book, there's a variation on this idea. After King Lune and his twin sons Kor and Corin have been reunited and the Kalar Marines defeated, Prince Rabadash is brought before them for judgment. In spite of Lune's goodness towards Rabadash, he mocks and scorns the king. He says, I hear no conditions from barbarians and sorcerers. The bolt of Tash falls from above. In the midst of this, Aslan suddenly appears and warns Rabadash to forget his pride and to accept the mercy of Lune. When Rabadash sees Aslan, however, he calls him demon, the foul fiend of Narnia and the enemy of the gods. He curses Aslan and calls for lightning in the shape of scorpions to rain on him. In a quiet warning by Aslan, the door as a metaphor associated with him is used. He says, have a care, Rabadash. The doom is nearer now. It's at the door. It's lifted the latch. Then, because Rabadash rejects Aslan's warning, he's turned into an ass. The use of the door here is to show that not everyone who meets Aslan in Narnia makes the appropriate connection. That is, he's God. And furthermore, that those who scornfully reject him will be judged. The door as a two-way opening functions here as one leading to judgment rather than mercy. Still another variation on the theme takes place at the stable door near the end of the last battle. Chapter 12, by the way, is entitled Through the Stable Door. Once the children and others are thrust through the door, they are surprised to find themselves not in a dark, damp stable, but on grass. The deep blue was overhead, and the air which blew gently on their faces was that of a day in early summer. Actually, they've entered Aslan's country through the stable door he created. As if to emphasize the metaphorical function of the door in terms of the Christian doctrine of regeneration, Lewis includes the story of Emeth, the devout Calamarine. In a passage that makes some Christians wince because of its suggestion of universalism, Lewis makes this clear. If any man swear by Tash and keep his oath for the oath's sake, it is by me that he's truly sworn. Unless thy desire had been for me, thou wouldst not have sought so long and so truly. For all find what they truly seek. Aslan, again, a two-way door into new life. Excuse me. Third, entry through the various doors is almost always unplanned by those who enter. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the children, individually and collectively, stumble through the wardrobe door, seemingly by accident. In Prince Caspian, the four children are unexpectedly jerked off of a railway platform and thrust into Narnian life 400 years after they had left. In The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, a picture of a sailing vessel on a wall suddenly becomes alive, and Lucy and Edmund tumble in with their cousin Eustace into the waves and are hauled on board by Caspian and the men of the Dawn Treader. Jill and Eustace in the silver chair have no idea they are entering Narnia, a Narnian dimension, when they run through the garden gate to escape the bullies who are chasing them. In The Magician's Nephew, Polly and Diggory are used by Diggory's mad uncle to experiment with magic rings that send them to the wood between the worlds, where they eventually make their way into Narnia. In each case, the children are not seeking directly to enter Narnia. When they find themselves there, they're surprised. Only in The Silver Chair and The Last Battle do we find instances of the children trying to get into Narnia. These cases, however, bear a little bit of qualification. In The Silver Chair, Eustace and Jill do ask to be taken into Narnia, yet their initial request is not honored. Indeed, it's only after they aroused from their call to Aslan by bullying schoolmates that, in desperation, they try to flee through a locked door in a garden wall. This time, the locked door opens and the two children unexpectedly enter Narnia. And in The Last Battle, the children, although actively seeking to use the magic rings in order to respond to the mysterious appearance of Tyrion, who calls on them for help, actually enters Narnia for the final time as a result of a train crash that has killed all of them, a fact that they do not initially, nor do we as readers, comprehend. That the entries tend to be unplanned suggests two things. On the one hand, the unexpected entries parallel Lewis's own realization about his lifelong quest for joy. As he records in Surprised by Joy, the one thing or the one characteristic of joy was that its occurrence was always unexpected. If he tried to seek it or find it or produce it, he never had success. It had to occur spontaneously. Eventually, the experience of joy itself came to have a slightly different meaning for him. He writes, "I believe that the old stab of joy, the old bittersweet, has come to me as often and as sharply since my conversion as at any time of my life whatever. But I now know that the experience was valuable only as a pointer to something other and outer." In a similar vein, I believe he arranges the unexpected entries into Narnia so that the children will experience the awe and wonder of Narnia, not at their own bidding, which could become cheap and worn out, but at the bidding of another, with a capital A. Familiarity, after all, breeds contempt. To underline this point, Lewis has the professor at the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe answer the children's question about their possible return to Narnia with this: "Of course you'll get back to Narnia again one day, but don't go trying to use the same route twice. Indeed, don't try to get there at all. It'll happen when you're not looking for it." In addition, I believe that a second reason the entries appear to be accidental parallels the process by which some people experience spiritual regeneration. That is, some people have come into a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ in an unplanned way. Faith in Christ may have been the furthest thing from their minds. Indeed, they may have been openly hostile to the Christian message, and yet, for whatever reasons, they were suddenly struck by the beauty and the truth of Christ's call and found themselves irresistibly drawn to faith in him. The unexpected surprise by joy that the children experience when they tumble through the varying Narnian doors is an apt parallel to the joy many new believers in Christ often experience. The final significant use of the doors as a metaphor concerns those who enter. Specifically, all who enter Narnia are in one way or another called to be there. This point may seem to contradict my previous argument that the characters enter Narnia unexpectedly, but I don't think it does. Just because the characters may not have been planning to enter Narnia does not mean that they weren't called. The evidence that characters are called into Narnia are overwhelming. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the children have been called into Narnia at the exact time that they are in order to fulfill several prophecies and to coincide with the precise return of Aslan. Their entry through the wardrobe door may have surprised them, but it was planned and predetermined by Aslan. In Prince Caspian, the children are literally called into Narnia when Caspian, in desperation, blows Susan's magic horn. In The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the children are called into Narnia in order that they can discover, as has already been mentioned, that Aslan exists in their own world as Jesus. In The Silver Chair, Eustace and Jill only think they are calling Aslan. Actually, he has called them. After Jill passes through the normally locked garden door, she meets Aslan and has a conversation with him. After he rebukes her for having caused Eustace to fall over the Narnian cliff, he says, quote, "The task, that is to help find the lost Prince Rilian, the task for which I called you and him out of your own world. That's why you're here. It would have been harder now." When she tries to correct Aslan by saying that she and Eustace have been calling to a capital somebody, Aslan replies, "You would not have called to me unless I had been calling to you." Lewis is paralleling here the biblical notion of God calling to himself all those who are willing to come to him. In the John 10 passage referenced earlier, we see this. Jesus says, "He who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice." In The Magician's Nephew, by the way, the title of the first chapter in that book is The Wrong Door, and the title of the 7th chapter is What Happened in Front of the Front Door. Diggory is called into Narnia so that he can be the agent both of death and life. Because of his pride, he causes Jesus and her attending evil to enter Narnia at its creation. Yet Aslan uses him to bring back the seeds from the silver apple tree that are planted and bring forth the tree of protection. In passing, it's worth noting that Lewis again alludes to the John 10 passage, for when Diggory approaches the place where the tree is, he encounters a high wall and door. Above the door is the following inscription: "Come in by the gold gate or not at all. Take of my fruit for others or forbear. For those who steal or those who climb my wall shall find their heart's desire and find despair." In John 10:1 we read, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber." Lastly, in the last battle, the children are called into Narnia for the last time, both to help Tyrion in the final defense of Narnia, and so that they can be taken into Aslan's country. Yet not all who are called decide to stay in Narnia, the most notable being Susan, who we learn in the last battle is interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick, and invitations. Others, however, refuse to stay in Narnia once they have entered through the door because they are unable or unwilling to see what Narnia is all about. Maybe echoing, "They have eyes but see not, and they have ears but do not hear." Eustace might have been like this had he not been transformed into a dragon and seen himself for what he really was. As a result, he changed and later enters Aslan's country. More to the point is Diggory's uncle Andrew. Although his entry into the pre-Narnian world would appear to be accidental, he is actually called by Aslan so that he might be given a chance to refocus his life away from black magic and egocentricity and towards righteousness and selflessness. Unfortunately, Uncle Andrew does not respond because his sensibilities have been deadened. For example, while Aslan sings his song of creation, Uncle Andrew was not liking the voice. Later, all he could hear was nothing but roaring in Aslan's song. And then we read, "And when at last the lion had spoken, said Narnia, awake, Uncle Andrew didn't hear any words. He only heard a snarl. And when the beast spoke an answer, he only heard barkings and growlings and bayings and howlings. And when they laughed, such a horrid, bloodthirsty din of hungry and angry brutes he had never heard in his life." Aslan himself sums up Uncle Andrew's problem later in a response to Polly's request that Aslan remove the old man's fear. Aslan says, "I cannot tell the meaning. I cannot tell him the meaning of my song of creation to this old sinner, and I cannot comfort him either. He has made himself unable to hear my voice. If I spoke to him, he would only hear growlings and roarings. O Adam's sons, how cleverly you defend yourselves against all that might do you good. Uncle Andrew's failure to heed Aslan's call is reminiscent of those in Jesus' parable who failed to respond properly to a wedding invitation. For many are called, but few are chosen. Lewis's frequent use of the door as a metaphor having to do with Christian themes and ideas is both subtle and persistent. The literal doors lead to the door, Aslan. Aslan functions as a two-way door. Entry through the doors is unplanned, and all who are called but are not compelled to stay. In his sermon, The Weight of Glory, Lewis employs the same metaphor, and I think it's appropriate to conclude by quoting him. Lewis writes, "The sense that in this universe we are treated as strangers, the longing to be acknowledged, to meet with some response, to bridge some chasm that yawns between us and reality, is a part of our inconsolable secret. And surely from this point of view, the promise of glory in the sense described becomes highly relevant to our deep desire." And for glory meant good report with God, acceptance by God, response, acknowledgement, and welcome into the heart of things. The door on which we've been knocking all our lives will open at last. Apparently then, our lifelong nostalgia, our longing to be reunited with something in the universe from which we now feel cut off, to be on the inside of some door which we have always seen from the outside, is no mere neurotic fancy, but the truest index of our real situation. Thank you. We have time for some questions, so you want to ask anything or make a comment? Yes, sir.
Any comparisons here with like the Irish idea of thin places? Does Lewis ever connect some of the popular?
I'm not sure. Has anybody done the work on Lewis and that question? Did you hear the question? Did Lewis make any connection? Say it again.
Like between thin places, like in Ireland, places where you just feel closer to the
Does Lewis ever make a connection somewhere about the idea of thin places in Ireland where you can enter into that other dimension? Yeah. I can't think of anything offhand, but I wouldn't be surprised.
In some of his letters, he alludes to the fact that he's grown up in this mysterious land, and that he hadn't really appreciated it in his younger years, but he did when he got older. That's sort of in the background. I don't think it's explicit or overt, but I think it's in the background, and he'd heard these stories. So
he touches on it a little bit.
You could say is a possibly so.
Yeah, I think he touches on it or alludes to it in some of his early poems too before his conversion. Yes, ma'am.
The four children are defined as sons of men and daughters of men.
Sons of Adam and daughters of Eve.
Excuse me. Is there any additional reference to each one of them specifically related to some biblical character?
I can't think of any, but I'm happy to have somebody else take that one on.
Repeat the question.
The question is, the four children in the Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe are referred to as the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve. And I think the question is are there other...
Yes, are there other references to biblical characters that the two boys...
Yeah, are there other references to biblical characters? Again, I can't think of anything offhand.
Yeah, again, it wouldn't be overt, but it is suggestive.
Well, just by calling them sons of Adam and daughters of Eve. That's a pretty powerful suggestion, but I don't think he goes beyond that
They
anyway.
sort of function in ways that are familiar. For instance, Lucy has a special place in those first few books, and she's the one who essentially functions as a prophet. And you find that in the first book and the second book. And Edmund, it's more typology, I suppose. Edmund is the traitor. Well, Peter was the traitor. And so you've got them functioning sort of like that. So they are familiar characters. They're not overtly identified that way because he's not really overtly using any Christian or biblical terminology, except you see Don has unfolded this whole thing and it's all there, but it's at a deeper level than just the surface.
Yeah, and as Jason suggested yesterday, Lewis is trying to steal past watchful dragons. So he's not going to be very explicit in terms of trying to make those biblical connections. He kind of leaves it for us to do, I think. Good question. Maybe one more? Oh, yes.
Do you see this idea of the door meaning in his other works, like space ability?
Do I see it in his other works? I certainly haven't looked at it as closely, that's for sure. Does something strike you right now about that? Think about it. Yeah, think about it. Yeah.
They're all good paper topics.
Yeah, these are all future scholarly essays or books.
I'm struck by the possible difference in Lewis and Tolkien's use of doors. Door is an initial image getting us into Middle Earth, but it's the barrier to adventure. Bilbo's very protective of his pristine door, and the door has to be marked up and then opened in order for the adventure to begin.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's saying that Lewis and Tolkien use doors differently. For Tolkien, in some cases at least, the door it's almost a matter of protection. Bilbo not wanting to go out and find out what's going on outside of Middle Earth. Yeah, nice point. Yes?
Thanks for opening the window on Lewis's use of doors. Do you have a current Lewis project? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I'm kind of like Hal. I'm not sure I have a big project left in me. I do have several essays coming up, most of them having to do with Joy Davidman. I would like to explore the correspondence between Albert and Jack and Warnie before Albert dies in 1929. I don't think that's ever been published. It's been referred to, I'm sure, in all the biographies, but I just wondered if it would be kind of interesting to look at that correspondence. So, and maybe there's a memoir in me somewhere, although my life's not been that interesting. So, I mean, I was in Montreat for 51 years, chapter 2. Thank you for coming. It's time for a break downstairs.
Again, I'm William O'Flaherty. My podcast, All About Jack, has been around since 2011. My more recent YouTube channel is called Knowing and Understanding C.S. Lewis. Finally, everything I do related to Lewis is centralized at the website essentialcslewis.com. And in case you didn't know, I've written 2 Lewis-themed books. The Misquotable C.S. Lewis was released in 2018. It examines 75 quotations credited to him that he either didn't write or paraphrases of something he did or without the context could be misunderstood. In 2016, my enhanced study guide to the Screwtape letters came out. It's called C.S. Lewis Goes to Hell. Thanks again for listening, and please consider liking and sharing this episode with others.